Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about a situation that is developing into one of the most serious urban crises the Middle East has seen in decades. Tehran's main water lifeline is reportedly gone, millions of residents are facing extreme shortages, and the consequences are now spreading far beyond daily inconvenience into politics, security, and survival itself. Tehran is a city of nearly 10 million people, and even more if you count surrounding urban areas. For a city of this size, water is not just a utility, it is the foundation of everything. Homes, hospitals, factories, power plants, food supply chains, and sanitation systems all depend on it. When that system collapses, life in the city begins to unravel very quickly. Reports suggest that key water lines feeding Tehran have either failed, dried up, or become unusable due to years of neglect, overuse, and environmental mismanagement. Reservoir levels are critically low, groundwater has been exhausted, and emergency measures are no longer enough to cover the gap between supply and demand. For years, experts warned that Tehran was heading toward a water catastrophe. Population growth continued unchecked, construction expanded relentlessly, and water consumption rose while natural replenishment declined. Instead of addressing these structural problems, authorities relied on temporary fixes and optimistic promises. Climate change has made the situation worse. Rainfall patterns have changed, snowpack in the mountains has shrunk, and prolonged droughts have become more frequent. Rivers that once fed dams and reservoirs are now seasonal or nearly dry for much of the year. The system that once supported the capital simply cannot keep up anymore. What makes this crisis different is its sudden visibility. Water shortages are no longer limited to distant provinces or rural communities. This time, the heart of the country is affected. Entire neighborhoods in Tehran are experiencing low pressure or no water at all for hours or even days. When water stops flowing, the first impact is domestic life. Families cannot cook, clean, or bathe properly. Toilets stop working. Hygiene becomes difficult and the risk of disease increases. For elderly people, children, and those with health conditions, the danger is immediate and serious. Hospitals and clinics face enormous pressure. Medical facilities require constant water supply for sanitation, surgeries, dialysis, and cooling systems. Emergency reserves exist, but they are limited. Prolonged shortages can force hospitals to reduce services or shut down certain departments entirely. Industries are also affected. Factories need water for cooling, processing, and cleaning. When supply becomes unreliable, production slows or stops. Workers are sent home, wages are lost, and economic stress increases. In a city like Tehran, this quickly translates into widespread financial anxiety. Small businesses feel the impact almost immediately. Restaurants cannot operate normally, laundries shut down, car washes close, and service-based jobs disappear. For people already struggling with inflation and unemployment, water shortages become another unbearable burden. As conditions worsen, public anger grows. People begin asking why this was allowed to happen. Why were warnings ignored? Why were resources diverted elsewhere? Why were funds spent on regional projects while basic infrastructure at home crumbled? This anger is no longer private. It is being expressed openly in conversations, online platforms, and in some cases on the streets. Water protests have occurred before in Iran, but they were often localized. A crisis in Tehran carries far greater political weight. Security forces are reportedly on alert as authorities try to prevent unrest. But controlling public frustration is far more difficult when the problem affects daily survival. You can suppress protests, but you cannot easily suppress thirst. One of the most striking aspects of this crisis is the reported movement of officials and elites. Claims have emerged that some senior figures and their families are leaving Tehran or spending extended time elsewhere, where water access is more secure. Whether every report is accurate or not, the perception matters. When ordinary citizens believe that leaders are fleeing while telling everyone else to remain calm, trust collapses completely. This sense of abandonment fuels resentment and deepens the legitimacy crisis. The idea of evacuating parts of Tehran, once unthinkable, is now being discussed openly. Moving millions of people is not a realistic short-term solution, but even talking about it signals how severe the situation has become. A city evacuation on this scale would be unprecedented in the region outside of war or natural disasters like earthquakes. It would require massive coordination, resources, and planning that simply do not exist in the current system. Even partial evacuation would strain neighboring cities and provinces. Water, housing, food, and jobs would all be affected. Social tensions could spread beyond Tehran. turning a local infrastructure collapse into a national crisis. The water problem is also closely tied to electricity. Power plants require water for cooling, and water pumping stations require electricity to operate. When one system falters, it puts pressure on the other. This creates a dangerous cycle of cascading failures. If electricity outages increase, water distribution becomes even more unreliable. If water shortages persist, power generation becomes more difficult. This feedback loop threatens the stability of the entire urban system. Food supply chains are another concern. Markets, storage facilities, and food processing plants all depend on water. Disruptions can lead to shortages, price spikes, and panic buying. In a city as large as Tehran, even short-term supply issues can escalate rapidly. Psychological stress should not be underestimated. Living without reliable water creates constant anxiety. People begin hoarding, fighting over access, and losing trust in neighbors and institutions. Social cohesion weakens as everyone focuses on survival. Children growing up in these conditions experience long-term effects. Education is disrupted, health suffers, and a sense of insecurity becomes normal. These impacts last far beyond the immediate crisis. The government's response so far has focused on rationing, emergency water deliveries, and public messaging urging calm. But these measures do not address the core problem. They only delay the inevitable reckoning with years of mismanagement. Large-scale solutions like desalination, water transfer projects, or rebuilding infrastructure take years and massive investment. Even if started immediately, they cannot solve the current emergency. This gap between short-term needs and long-term fixes is the most dangerous space. International sanctions complicate the situation further. Access to advanced technology, financing, and global expertise is limited. While sanctions are not the sole cause of the crisis, they reduce flexibility and options at a critical moment. At the same time, many Iranians argue that resources exist but have been misallocated. They point to spending on regional influence, military programs, and ideological projects while domestic infrastructure decayed. This crisis is forcing a national conversation about priorities. Water exposes reality in a way few other issues can. You can debate politics, ideology, and foreign policy endlessly, but when the tap runs dry, arguments lose meaning. Environmental damage has played a major role. Over-extraction of groundwater caused land subsidence in and around Tehran. In some areas, the ground has sunk so much that repairing pipes and canals has become extremely difficult. Dams upstream have altered natural flows, often benefiting certain regions while depriving others. Poor coordination and lack of transparency worsened competition over water between provinces, creating long-standing tensions. Urban planning failures also contributed. Tehran expanded vertically and horizontally without securing sustainable water sources. Luxury developments, malls, and high-rise buildings increase consumption while offering little benefit to water conservation. Public trust in official statistics and statements is low. When authorities say the situation is under control, many residents simply do not believe it. Years of contradictory messaging have eroded credibility. Social media has amplified both information and fear. Videos of dry taps, empty reservoirs, and long lines for water spread rapidly. Even rumors can trigger panic when people already feel vulnerable. The global community is watching closely. A water-driven urban crisis in Tehran has regional implications. Migration pressures, economic instability, and political consequences could ripple outward. History shows that water shortages have contributed to social upheaval in many societies. When basic needs are unmet, patience disappears. Systems that appear strong can weaken very quickly. This moment represents more than a technical failure. It is a test of governance, accountability, and adaptability. How leaders respond now will shape public perception for years to come. Some voices within Iran are calling for radical reforms in water management, transparency, and decision-making. Others argue that without broader political change, technical solutions will always fall short. For ordinary people, these debates feel distant. Their immediate concern is simple and urgent: access to clean water today, tomorrow, and next week. Survival does not wait for policy reform. As temperatures rise, the pressure will increase. Summer heat dramatically raises water demand. What feels like a crisis now could become catastrophic in the coming months if conditions do not improve. The possibility of disease outbreaks cannot be ignored. Lack of sanitation and clean water creates fertile ground for infections, especially in densely populated urban areas. International humanitarian assistance is a sensitive topic. Accepting help can be seen as weakness, but refusing it can cost lives. Balancing pride, politics, and necessity is another challenge facing decision makers. This crisis may ultimately force changes that years of debate could not. Water has a way of cutting through denial and rhetoric. It demands attention, action, and honesty. Whether Tehran can stabilize the situation or slides deeper into chaos remains uncertain. What is clear is that the era of ignoring environmental limits is over. The coming weeks will be critical. Every decision, delay, and message will matter. People are watching closely, not just for solutions, but for signs of responsibility and empathy. This is not just a story about pipes and reservoirs. It is a story about how a system responds when reality can no longer be postponed. As the situation unfolds, the human cost must remain at the center of the conversation. Behind every statistic are families, children, and individuals trying to get through another day. The world has seen how quickly urban crises can escalate. Tehran now stands at a crossroads, facing choices that will define its future. We will continue to follow this developing situation closely and bring you updates as they emerge. Thank you for watching, stay informed, and take care.